Okay, so what I'm going to do is start with Tinkercad. So yeah, so let's go ahead. I'm going to open up Tinkercad, and this is a great beginner's 3D modeling application. So if you've never 3D modeled before, Tinkercad is a great start. And it's really good for 3D printing. You can create objects to be printed in a 3D printer relatively easy with this program. So it's an online application, and so you need to make an account through Autodesk. And the website I'll put in the chat, it's www.tinkercad.com. And so I'll show you how it works. So you make an account, you log in the browser, and you're presented with a workspace that looks like this. And so what you're going to do is right click to change your view, and you can also change your view with this cube up here. You can snap to different views. So it makes it very, very easy to change your perspective, because essentially you are creating a 3D object using a 2D screen. So you need to be able to navigate and orbit around the object as you're building it on a 2D screen. And the way you do that is by changing your perspective. So usually the first thing you do is click on one of these blocks, one of these boxes they call them, but it's actually a cube. And you put a cube in the space. And actually this will be a good idea. So what I'll do is I'll go through the three main apps that I'm going to go through, and I'll show you how you can manipulate a cube within the software. So all I did was drag this cube in, and it gives you all these options here that you can change. But really, some of the more important options that you're going to use are these little dots and symbols you see all around the cube itself. So they each have their own specific purpose. And so you see the white dots on the corners. You notice there's 5 white dots. And they're not really dots, they're more like white squares. Each square allows you to change a particular dimension. And the one on each corner of the cube actually changes 2 dimensions at the same time, the length and the width. So you see I just click and drag, and you can see I'm manipulating each corner as I drag along the white dot. Now it's a little confusing because the 5th white dot is sort of unlike the others, because it doesn't change 2 dimensions and it doesn't change the width or the height. It just changes the height of the cube. And this isn't to be confused with changing how high the cube is in the air. To do that, you would actually hover over this cube, this black cone looking symbol, and looks like a little triangle, and you actually grab that and you can drag it. And so that's how you change the height. If I wanted to change the length or the width, as far as it's where it is, left or right, that sounds confusing. So basically, you can change the length of the length of the length, the width of the width, and the height of the height with the white squares. If you want to move the object in the specific axis, that's what I'm looking for, the word. So if I want to move it in the up and down axis, a lot of times that's the Z axis, you're going to drag that black cone. If you want to drag it along the X or Y axis, and that can change depending on the program you're using, but the way you would move it is by actually clicking on a part of the object that doesn't have a symbol on it, and then you can drag left and right, okay? So to move it along an axis, you drag it on a spot that doesn't have a symbol, or you drag this black cone, and to change the dimension of to change the amount of one of the dimensions, you can grab one of these white squares. And the black squares here, these are more like dots. These lock in one particular dimension. And I should actually I should send a letter to the makers of Tinkercad, because these symbols are confusing. I think they could be done better, and I think they could be more intuitive for how they work, but that's neither here nor there. This is still a fantastic program. And if you want to rotate the cube, you see these little curved arrows. These will allow you to rotate along each axis. Why are there only 3 axes rather? Well, it's because there's 3 dimensions: length, width, and height. So if you want to rotate along each of the axes, you just drag the symbol around. Really, you click on the symbol and you drag it. And you notice if I go in a wide circle, I can fine tune the amount I want to rotate. But if I go in close, I can actually snap in, it's something like, what is it, 12.5 increments along each axis. Okay, so that's Tinkercad and how you manipulate the cube. Obviously, it's a lot more complicated than that, and there's a lot more options, but that's, like I said, I'm going to go through and show you how to manipulate a cube in each program. So that's Tinkercad. Let's go from easiest let's go from easy to difficult, let's say. So next in line would be SketchUp, and SketchUp is good for architecture. You can also 3D print with it, and you can do all sorts of things. Whenever you're working with a 3D modeling program, and at least these 3 in particular that I'm looking at, there's all sorts of different things you can do with 3D models, whether it's put them in a video game or send them to a 3D printer, or create CGI with them, or video effects. There's all sorts of different ways that you can use 3D models. And so SketchUp is really good for creating layouts and blueprints, and 3D models of architecture is where it excels, but you can do much more. So to orbit and change your perspective in SketchUp, it's a little different. In Tinkercad, you right click. In SketchUp, you actually click with your middle mouse button and drag, and that's how you change your perspective. And first thing I do is get rid of the person they put inside the world, and so you just click on them and then press the delete key on your keyboard. And so what I want to do is make a cube. So what I'm going to do is go over to the sidebar here and click on the rectangle. And it's interesting the way they do it. You draw a rectangle in your 3D space, and you actually take that 2D rectangle and you drag it up into 3D space. Okay, so it's cool. They have this push-pull tool that you can use, and now I have my cube. All right, and it's really interesting how you can use the push-pull tool and the rectangle tool over and over to create, different outcomes. So I created two more rectangles, and I can push-pull 2 more rectangles. I can push-pull virtually any side. It gets a little tricky if the side itself is curved, but you can tell already from Tinkercad, it's a completely different way of working with the model. So obviously you're going to be able to get different results, and it's just a whole different a way of working. Okay, so that's a very simple look at SketchUp. And what I'm going to do right now is look at Blender. And Blender is probably the least intuitive 3D modeling application that's out there. And they just had a major update on their platform. And so it's actually a lot, they made a lot of changes. They updated it in a lot of ways. And I'm just trying to get it so you can see the full window here. And so, yeah, so they updated the program, and it looks a lot more sleek. And so you see right off the bat, they start you off with a cube. You don't even have to put it in. And the controls are a little bit different, but like SketchUp, you push in the middle mouse button to orbit around the cube itself. And what I like about Blender is there's a lot of keyboard shortcuts, so you can actually really quickly whip up some designs. And let me make sure you can see the buttons that I'm pressing on the keyboard as I press them. So let's see. Yep. Okay, so you should be able to see. So if I want to move it along the X axis, say, what I do is I push X. Oh, sorry. I gotta have the object selected, and then I got to push G for grab. And when you push G for grab, what it does is lock onto the mouse, and you can basically move it wherever you want. But if I want to move it along a particular axis while I'm in this grab mode, what I do is I just type in the axis. So I'll type X, and now I'm locked on the X axis. If I wanted to move along the Y axis, I'd push Y. Okay, and Z for up and down. So you can see that's how I would move along each particular axis. And if I want, I can apply the same idea to changing the dimension. So if I want to change the size of it in a particular direction, what I do is I push S for scale. And if I don't lock onto an axis, it actually just does a uniform scale. But if I push X, you can see it scales along the X axis. If I push Y along the Y, and then Z around the Z. So you can see how that works. Get a basic idea of how that works. And to rotate the object, I just push R. Okay, and the same rules apply. So if I push X, rotates around X axis, Y around Y, and then Z around Z. All right. Cool thing about Blender is you can make animations. So this is where you can actually make CGI. You can make animations for video games. You can make animations for whatever purpose, and it's really cool. So it comes down to more keyboard shortcuts. So what I'm going to do is just show you how I can move this cube across the screen here in a real simple way. So what I'm going to do is lock what's called a keyframe in the animation in this particular size, in this particular position, in this particular size, rotation, and scale. Okay, so what I'm going to do is push I, and I'm going to lock. It's called loc rot scale, but it stands for location, rotation, and scale. And so basically, I just lock that in time and space. And what I'm going to do is go forward in time. They have this animation bar at the bottom. And what I'm going to do is move forward in time. Let's say I go all the way to the end here. And I'm forward in time. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm going to set the destination. So maybe I'll have it go, change its location over here, change its scale. Maybe I'll change just the x-axis to a little bit wider, and then maybe rotate it so it's like this. Okay, so this is the destination, and what I'm going to do is lock this in this future point in time, and that's it. What happens in between the two keyframes is what's called tweening, okay, hence the term. And so the computer will actually calculate all the in-between movements. And so what I'm going to do is press play, and you can see it's slowly matching up that initial position, scale, and rotation with the one that I set. And you see it has a smooth animation. This is the basics of how CGI works. The computer is doing a lot of the work. And it's, you can see I whipped that up in a minute. So that's manipulating with, that's how, that's the very, very basics of these three programs. And so what I'm going to do right now is look in the chat and see if you have any more questions about any of the particular applications.